Welcome back, students who are taking financial accounting, and in this series of videos we are working on the assigned homework problems from the digital study guide for Chapter 11, the Group B exercises. Note, accounting is about understanding the concepts and then applying that understanding to the situation at hand. If you get the application aspect wrong, that is one thing and is easily remedied by watching someone else work the problem. However, if you don't understand the concepts, that is a whole other thing. Watching a problem worked out will not help if you don't understand the underlying concepts. Go back and study the text material again and watch the theory videos. If you still don't understand the concepts, then either email or telephone an instructor to get help with that understanding. Right, exercise 11-30. Calculate certain information for the direct method. Right? Pilgrim Nationwide Insurance reported the following selected amounts in financial statements for August 31st, right? Adapted in millions, okay? So this is in millions. So what does that mean? That means if I have, this is not 24,859. This is $24,859,000. So it's that adding 3 zeros to the end of each one of those numbers changes it into millions. But you'll find that on financial statements when you do start getting up into the hundreds of millions of dollars, by writing in all of those zeros just takes up space, prone to error, doesn't look good. So they just adapt it by making everything in millions. Right? So we have income statement information, balance sheet information, and then it says required. Determine the following for Pilgrim during 2014. All right? During 2014. And so we have collection from customers, payment for inventory, so on and so forth. And I'm going to work each one of these right here in the empty space here, and then I'll pause the video and for you to be able to copy it down, and then I will end up erasing each one. All right. So A, for our collection from customers, right, we have to take our net sales, which are the 24,859, and I have to consider my accounts receivable, right? Now, when I look at my accounts receivable, now remember, we're talking about collections from customers, right? So when I'm selling something, all right, this is, how do I get anything from a customer? I have to sell something. So that's the base number I'm working from, okay? And if they paid strictly in cash, then I get 24,859,000 in cash, but I'm not getting strictly in cash, okay? So I have to consider my accounts receivable and my collections on that accounts receivable, right? So come on, pen. All right, there we go. So I start out with my sales of 24,859,000, right? Then I have to look at my accounts receivable. Well, I can't just take one number. I mean, we're talking about during 2014. So my change in my accounts receivable, I had started out with 760,000, and well, actually, let me do it over here instead. I had started out with 760,000, and I ended up with 580, not 760,000, 760 million, and I ended up with 581 million, which is a difference of 179 million. That is a decrease in my accounts receivable. So I have to add that in because I got cash back from it, right? The different, when I add those two figures up, I end up with $25,038,000 as my collection from my customers. Okay, I start out with my net sales, and then I have to consider how much my accounts receivable decreased or increased during that period, and that will give me my collection from customers. All right, so I'm pausing the video, and I'm going to erase this. You pause the video, and I'll erase this. Okay, so that was A. B, payments for inventory, right? So when we think about inventory, we start out with our cost of goods sold of 18,162,000. Okay, as I was writing that number, what ran through my mind was, remember, you have to understand the totality of the concept, okay? And this is something that has been building over the entire course of this textbook through the last 10 chapters, right? I'm going here and as I started out with cost of goods sold, even though this says payment for inventory, well, why am I starting out with cost of goods sold? Okay, because we're looking at our payments for the inventory. We're selling something out of inventory. Well, when we sold it out of inventory, what was the entry for it? Cost of goods sold. That's why we're starting with the cost of goods sold. Then we have to look at the inventory and our increase or decrease in inventory. Well, if I had started out with 3,480,000 and now I have 2,888,000, right? My inventory decreased by 592, right? So I subtract out that decrease in the inventory of 592, right? The other thing that affects my inventory is my accounts payable, right? Well, what was the increase or decrease in my accounts payable, right? So I had 1,427,000. This million thing is killing me here. And now I have 1,610,000, right? That was an increase in my accounts payable of 183, right? So that's going to reduce my the cash position by 183 million, right? So the amount that I paid for my inventory ends up being 17,387 as my payments for my inventory. Right? So go ahead and pause the video. I'm erasing. Okay. Okay, and this exercise is valuable because we're calculating certain information for the direct method. You can't just look at your financial statements and take the figures from 2014, all right? When you're thinking about your statement of cash flows, you have to say, oh, I have a beginning balance and I have an ending balance. We're looking at the difference between the two, but we have to look at each individual activity and make the determination as to the effects on cash for that activity. So I have payments of operating expenses. All right, so when I look at my income statement here, I have other operating expenses, so I'm going to start out with 4,883,000, and I need to take out my accrued liabilities. So I have 936 less 845, right? That gives me a decrease of 91. So I add that 91 back in, and that means my payments of operating expenses are 4,974,000. Why am I looking at accrued liabilities? Because I'm talking about my operating expenses, okay? I have a figure to begin with for my operating expenses, but what else affects my operating expenses? Well, my liabilities, all right? And if I have an accrued liability, all right, I have to take that into consideration. All right, so pause the video, write that down. All right, so now we have an acquisition of property and equipment. No sales were made during 2014, right? So our property, plant, and equipment had a balance of 4,345,000 in it, right? When we think about our assets, we have to consider our depreciation, okay? And our depreciation was 288. And then we have to take out the beginning, right? Because we're looking for the acquisition of property, plant, and equipment. No sales were made, right? So we have an ending. We have to consider our depreciation, and then we have to take into account our beginning balance, right? Because we're looking for the change here in the acquisition of our property, plant, and equipment, which ends up being 754 million, right? Acquisition of property, plant, and equipment. Here's our beginning. We make sales. Here's our ending. What is, we don't make sales, our depreciation expense. Sorry, we have to take out our depreciation expense. And this is what our acquisition costs are for that equipment during that period of time. Okay, so with that, pause the video here and write those down because I'm going to erase it. Okay, long-term borrowing, assuming Pilgrim made no payments on long-term liabilities. Okay, so what's the our long-term liabilities? We have an ending and a beginning of 500 and 470. No payments were made. The change in our long-term borrowing is 30 million. It's just that simple. Okay. Pause the video. All right. And proceeds from the issuance of common stock. So let's see here, common stock, right? We have an ending balance of 675 and a beginning balance of 615, which means the proceeds from the issuance of common stock was 60 million, right? Just that simple. Notice we don't have any treasury stock here on our balance sheet. If I had treasury stock on my balance sheet, this calculation might be different because remember, treasury stock is our purchasing back the common stock. But because we don't have that, it's very simple. What's the change between 2013 and 2014? Remember, as we were going through these calculations, it's determine the following during 2014. So it's asking what was the change for the period. That's what we're determining. Okay. All right, pause the video. I'm erasing this. Okay, and lastly, oops. All right, lastly, the payments of cash dividends. Okay, now remember, for the payment of cash dividend, notice that there's nothing on our income statement here, and there's nothing on our balance sheet. All right, but where do the cash dividends come from? They come from the retained earnings account, right? And when we look at our retained earnings account, if you'll recall from the previous exercises, let me just quickly jump back. If you go back to exercise 11-26B, we work through this, the same type of thing in that particular exercise. All right. So we start out with our beginning retained earnings of 4,683,000. Then we have to add in our net income, all right? And it tells us our net income for the year was 4 million, sorry. And then we have to subtract our ending balance, right, which is 4,198,000. And what's left over is our cash dividends, and that is 1,479,000 is what they paid out in cash dividends, right? Okay, so that's it for this exercise, and actually for this, section of the homework problems. The only thing we have left to do are the the problems for the assigned homework problems for Chapter 11. All right. If you didn't understand this, go back and watch the video again. Relatively simple, but you have to understand the underlying concepts as to what is involved with each and every item. Now, you're looking here at like 7 different requirements, A through G. They could have easily just made, another 4 or 5 or 6, okay? Um, the whole idea being here is that no, you're not going to be able to just copy it exactly when you come across a test situation or in the workplace. You have to get accustomed to thinking through, working through the problem based upon understanding the concept and then applying it to the situation. So with that said, if you have any questions, watch the theory videos again, and if not, if you still don't get something, then yes, feel free to telephone and speak with an instructor, and I'll see you in the next series of videos for the problems for this chapter.